As audiologists, we have the opportunity to make quite a significant difference in our patients' lives on a daily basis. Are we doing enough, though, outside of our offices to ensure that the society in which our patients live in is accepting and inclusive and accessible? Today we are at Saint Vincent's School for the Deaf to find out what their audiologists and speech pathologists' take is on all of this, if I can just find them.
Sign language is really important, but I also feel the world often has lots of auditory information, but obviously from a deaf and hard of hearing individual's perspective, you need a lot more visual information. So lots of places, even in terms of safety, they have fire alarms that you can only hear, but for a deaf individual, they don't have access to that, and that places them at a safety risk. Or even just from an independence point of view, being able to do things by themselves. Even, I will use this as an example, but my one friend told me when she goes through the McDonald's driveway, it seems like such a small thing, but there they ask you from an auditory point of view what you would like to order, and you have to verbally respond. But now if you are deaf or hard of hearing, you can't do that, so it makes it a little bit more difficult just to access any of those kinds of services.
I still think there's a huge stigma relating to things like hearing aids, cochlear implants, and hearing loss generally. They call it the invisible disability. But the way people respond to that is, I find it relatively offensive sometimes. Hearing people often will try and avoid the person who has a hearing loss or speak to a hearing person who's with them rather than to them. And I feel like rather, treat them as though you would treat anybody else, because I can tell you they will appreciate that a lot more than being ignored, shunted to one side, or not addressed directly. I think for me that's a big thing. Rather than being scared, embrace it. And
they want to be treated as a person.
Exactly.
They know that the communication barriers are there, but that doesn't mean just because it's difficult that they don't want you to interact with them.
They do want to learn about the hearing world and integrate a bit more. We see it when we talk to our deaf assistants or even the deaf kids. They like to ask us questions about how we do things, and it's important for both the cultures to integrate to be
I mean, a lot of people say, it must be so different to work at a school for the deaf. Honestly, they're the same as hearing kids. They come in here every day for therapy or whatever. He kicked me, he looked at me, he licked me, he punched me. It's the same problems. And there are just it's the same. It's just a different language, and I think that's.
So one thing that's really big, I would say, is access to services. So in the outside hearing world, we'll call it. Literally everything from going to a supermarket to going to a restaurant, being able to order food, complain to a manager, or even services that are really important for your health and your safety, accessing clinics or hospitals, going to the doctor, going to a policeman if something was stolen for you or something bad happened to you. Loads of those people do not know sign language, and so communication with them is so difficult. So often they're not able to report these problems and get the assistance that they need and just have that kind of independence, not because they don't know how to communicate, but because the other people are not aware of how to communicate with them.
I think from my side, having worked here for a while, access to education is a huge thing. So yes, we do have an amazing environment where kids are taught sign language and taught in sign language, and we're a bilingual school, so we teach in sign language and English. But so many of our kids come later on, so they've got missing years where they didn't develop any kind of language. They're already at a disadvantage, and through then having to learn two languages in order to be educated, there are those gaps that so many of them struggle to catch up with, and it doesn't mean that they're not capable of doing the academic work. It just means that they're struggling with the actual language involved in accessing that information, retaining it, and using it. So, for me, access to education is something that I think a lot of deaf individuals, are challenged with on a daily basis.
I think, sorry, before you go, I think also socialization and forming relationships with people as well. If you have a communication barrier, it kind of limits the amount of people that you can interact with. And I know a lot of our kids, their families don't know sign language. So they will go home, and because their families have never learned sign, the children are isolated. They just sit by themselves. They have no one to talk to. I think in a normal hearing school environment, kids go home and their parents ask how their day was, and you form those kinds of really important bonds and relationships. But for so many of our kids, because of that barrier, they're not able to do that, and I think that really makes them feel isolated.
Well, look, linked to that, so many of our children hate the school holidays.
Yeah.
To be quite frank. We used to count down to school holidays, like school's finished. And they don't want to leave. They don't want to leave in the afternoons. They don't want to leave on holiday because their community, their family is here. And these are the people that can communicate with them and share with them. So, yeah, I do 100%.
And I think as audiologists, obviously we deal a lot with hard of hearing population, deaf population, and presbycutic. A lot more presbycutic adults, etc. I think working specifically with the deaf community, there's so much that we can do. Small things, sort of just to help with the accessibility of services or the accessibility of communication, not being afraid, like generally how we feel about disabilities or learning sign language. As much we do it in first year varsity, but then never again. I think it's important to learn the skills. If somebody comes into the hospital, even at least the audiologist can communicate with them, or in private practice, or even if you see somebody in the line at Pick and Pay and you know a bit of sign language and can help out a little bit, or having more visual signs, or just giving somebody a little bit extra that they need, because essentially they are isolated from the hearing world, and that's something that we don't want and we don't advocate for. So to integrate, we need somebody from people from our profession specifically, because we deal so closely with hearing and hearing loss. We would be the first stepping stone, I think, to help integrate and bridge the gap between them.
So what do we love about working with kids who are deaf and hard of hearing?
1, 2, 3.
Everything!